Thank you so much, Nompumelelo, for that introduction. As advised, my name is Felicia Hlophe, and I'm a Senior Legal Advisor at Allan Gray. Thank you for joining us for this segment. We will be discussing how the retirement regulatory landscape is changing. Joining me on the panel this morning, I have Nicolette van Vuuren, a pension funds lawyer and a partner at Webber Wentzel. And I have Sanchia Petrie, a specialist analyst in the fund Governance and Trustee Conduct at the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining me and availing yourselves for this discussion today.
Thank you, Felicia. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So before we dive in, I'd just like to recap on where we come from in terms of the regulatory landscape so far. So the South African government has, over the last decade, set up a number of retirement reforms with the aim of promoting retirement savings as well as helping South Africans achieve their retirement goals. For example, in 2016 came tax harmonisation, where the tax deduction allowance for contributions paid to pension, provident and retirement annuity funds was harmonised. In 2017, saw the implementation of the default regulations, such as Regulation 37, which dealt with default investment portfolios, Regulation 38, which dealt with default preservation strategies, and Regulation 39, which dealt with annuity strategies at retirement. And then in 2021 came T-Day, which was part of the harmonisation process. T-Day aligned Provident Fund rules with that of pension funds, whereby members of Provident and Provident Preservation Funds were required to annuitize their retirement benefits at retirement. And then in 2024, we had the implementation of the two-part system, whereby there was a component split of a savings component, which allowed for annual access, as well as a retirement component, which was there to preserve and secure a long-term income at retirement. Which then brings us to the present day, ladies. Nicolette, it's been over a year now since the implementation of two-parts. In your view, do you think that what was intended with this reform has been achieved?
Well, I think we need to just take a step back and see what was the intention of the two-part system. And it was actually twofold. On the one hand, they wanted to give access to members for emergency funding. So anybody who's in a situation that they need access to money urgently, they wanted to allow access to that. And then on the other hand, they wanted to ensure that members save until their retirement, because South Africa has got a history of not saving properly for retirement. So if we look at it from that context, I think it has achieved what it wanted to do. Members have been able to access a certain portion. The max would have been 30,000 Rand, as you know. And on the other hand, there is a portion that has to be saved until retirement in the retirement components. But I think we've got to still be aware of the fact that there is the possibility of over-withdrawing. Those annual withdrawals that come, I believe that a lot of members have, first of all, taken their first withdrawal when the two-part system actually came in. And I think on an annual basis, members are going to want to have access to that, similar to a lotto. You know, you've got access to money, so you're going to take it. And I think there needs to be a lot of financial education to ensure that members understand exactly what they're in for. It's not as simple as just taking money out of your retirement savings or a little portion out. There's tax implications. I know in some funds, members who tried to withdraw didn't even get a cent out because the most of the money went to the tax man. So I think there's a lot of financial education that needs to be given to members so that they understand the implications. And yes, in dire situations, there is a little bit of money that you can access, but leave it for those dire situations.
Yes.
So yeah, in a way, I do think it's achieved it, but there is a lot of education that's got to come with it.
Yes, I 100% agree on, especially on the education part. I found that, you know, with the implementation of two parts, it did come with some teething issues. For example, I'm speaking now from the point of view of an administrator. We struggled when it came to Section 14 transfers from both private and some public funds, where some funds would just not get up for especially the component splits of it all. And so members were then left without, for example, if you had a member who was wanting to transfer into a preservation fund, wanting to ultimately then get into a living annuity, because we were not getting those component splits from the transferring fund, those members were then without an income for a couple of months. And I think it's very important to then advise members and have members know what actually is going on, because sometimes, you know, they end up blaming the administrators with regards to the delays. And so yes, I do definitely think that part of education is also just informing members so they know what's going on every step of the way.
And that contribution split in the public funds, mainly the DB funds, was not as clear as in the DC funds, whereas you knew 1/3, 2/3, you know, and there was a bit of implementation that had to happen with the DB funds so that they could actually understand what is the split, where do we go from here. So it wasn't as clear cut, so I can understand that there were severe teething issues.
Yes. So, Sanchia, post the implementation of two-pot, has the FSCA found any interesting findings or interesting trends with regards to how funds have implemented two-pot?
Felicia, you know, one of the interesting findings that we discovered regarding the two-pot implementation is the fees and the costs that were charged. So the transparency and reasonability of fees is a contentious issue in our industry due to the fact that we do not regulate these fees. So at the FSCA, we decided then to publish Information Request 2 of 2024, where we just wanted to do a review of the implementation costs relating to the two-pot, as well as look at how administrators plan on recovering these fees. So it went out to 111 active registered 13B administrators and 6 self-administered funds. And we had 76 valid responses, so we worked from that basis. And overall, the once-off cost was approximately 1.6 billion rand. That comes to 252 rand per member on average. However, the charges range between 0 and 3,000 rand, so that should be considered. Yes, the main drivers for these fees were system upgrades. That was 65% of the fees went towards that. The rest were additional staff that was required, as well as staff training. Now, in terms of how administrators plan on recovering these fees, 40% said that the business will absorb, you know, the costs. Okay. And then I think about 17 administrators indicated that they will increase the admin fees, but not by much. And then the last, obviously, was the withdrawal cost that came. So 50% of administrators said that they were not charging withdrawal fees, and 50% said that they were charging. And in terms of a flat rate, it ranged between 50 Rand to 500 Rand. And in terms of a variable rate, it ranged between 100 Rand to 750 Rand.
Wow.
One of the issues we picked up with the survey is the cross-subsidization that we discovered, especially between members who actually withdrew as opposed to those who didn't withdraw, in terms of long-term service versus short-term service, and also in terms of smaller benefits versus larger benefits. Now, we do not want to see this type of cross-subsidization, but to determine where it comes from right now is a bit tricky. So we will continue to have engagements as the FSCA with outliers, and we will also be monitoring these fees going forward.
Okay. Thank you. Wow, very interesting. So in my introduction, I touched on the regulations that have also come about in this landscape, and more specifically with regards to Regulation 28, right? So Regulation 28 was updated to promote infrastructure investment by retirement funds, and it increased the foreign investment limits from 30% to 45%. So Sanchia, I'm going to go to you again. Has the FSCA seen any trends when it comes to how funds have implemented, or how funds have been implementing Regulation 28, specifically on the BBBEE principles?
Well, we did a survey last year. It ran for about 6 months, just to check if funds are actually looking at the BBBEE are looking at BBEE in terms of Regulation 28. And we wanted to really check if they were following a tick box approach or if they were actually embedding the inclusivity that we are looking for. So the survey, we sent it out to 863 active funds. We only received 56% valid responses. That is another issue that we will be looking at because, you know, we send out these information requests, we send out these surveys, and funds just don't comply. That is an issue. You can't just not comply with what we require from you. So we will be looking at that. But anyway, it was at 56%. And the bad news is only 40% indicated that they have a procurement policy. But the good news is about 88% said that they do consider BBEE when, you know, engaging with a service provider. Okay. And then about 81% of those indicated that they actually ask for the certificate. However, only about half of them actually receive a certificate. So we really need these funds to push their service providers. If you tell your service provider, this is what I want you to report on, that is what they should be doing for you. You know, so yeah, we are looking at that. Nothing is set in stone right now. We have the retirement fund scorecard, but that has been voluntary all along. I know there's a push to make that mandatory. So maybe that in the future. The FSCA also signed an MOU with the BBEE Commission, you know, just to align our regulatory initiatives with transformation. So we will be looking at that again. We probably will be sending out another survey just to see if there are any changes in that space.
Hopefully you receive responses, valid responses for that next survey, yes. Speaking of the FSCA, the FSCA recently issued out Conduct Standard 2 of 2025 that imposes now compliance obligations on administrators who administer retirement funds, right? So some have said that this conduct standard actually is enhancing the regulatory framework that's set out in Board Notice 24, right? As Board Notice 24 prescribed certain conditions on administrators, such as their administration agreements and whatnot. Nicolette, what should administrators be cognizant of in terms of now complying with this conduct standard?
So first of all, it's not really a surprise that we've got this conduct standard. Board Notice 24 was 23 years old, and it's really far behind on a lot of the new financial sector laws that have come in. And also now knowing that COFI is coming in, I think this notice or this conduct standard was drafted with the view looking towards COFI, because we haven't yet got it, but we need to start regulating administrators now instead of waiting for COFI to be implemented. So I think that's why we've got this conduct standard, and I think it's a good idea to align how administrators are regulated with the rest of the financial institutions that the FSC overlooks. So there's a lot of this conduct standard aligns with COFI. If you had to read the amendments in COFI with this notice, you'll see that they actually go hand in hand. A lot of the provisions of Board Notice 24 are retained, although they're enhanced a little bit. So you will see like the administration agreements remain in the conduct standard. However, the conduct standard now sets out the exact requirements that are necessary in an admin agreement, as well as service levels. So they want you to include the service levels as well. So there are provisions in Board Notice 24 that have been retained but enhanced. And then if we look at the rest of the notice, that what is new in the conduct standard, it's moving to more of a phase regulation, where we're looking at fit and proper regulation of the administrator. We're looking at a key person being appointed, and that key person must now oversee the operations of the administrator. They must report to the FSCA, and they have got certain conditions that they need to comply with. So fit and proper requirements such as your qualifications, your experience, things like that. And then also the governing body has got regulations that they need to meet. So all in all, this conduct standard is actually aligning the way the FSCA regulates the administrators towards towards a more COFI regulation. Instead of what Board Notice 24 is right now, it's an operational compliance. Basically a tick box, like Sanchia was saying. You know, have you done this? Have you done that? Have you done this? Whereas now it's more from a conduct perspective. Are you treating your customers fairly? Board Notice 24 never even contemplated that. So it's looking at it more from a conduct perspective and regulating administrators from a conduct perspective.
Nice. I think that this is a good reform to have, definitely. And I mean, some people might argue that, you know, the FSCA is really shaking things up for administrators. But as you said, I think because in light of COFI coming in, it's better to get aligned now rather than later.
And they know, you know, now if they start implementing this conduct standard, administrators will know what they're going to be in for with COFI.
Yes.
Because as I say, it really is aligned to what is expected when COFI eventually comes in.
Yes, nice. Thank you for that, Nicolette. So we know that we've been speaking about fund administrators, but we know that it's not only fund administrators that are obviously within this retirement space that we're in. We also have trustees, right? So, Sanchia, recently I know that there was a redevelopment of the trustee toolkit. Where are we now with that?
When we first developed this toolkit in 2011, of course, we wanted to make sure that trustees had the necessary skills and knowledge, you know, to be able to manage their funds properly. The issue that we had then was that it was voluntary for the longest time. That's the first issue. And the second issue was the fact that we didn't update it at all. So we first started off with Conduct Standard 4 of 2020, which made it mandatory for trustees to complete the toolkit. And then we decided to redevelop the toolkit, you know, to ensure that it has updated information, because there've been various legislative changes over the years. And when we published it, we did it in 2 parts because it's 22 modules. It's quite comprehensive, so we wanted to give them enough time to complete it. We even gave them extensions. And now we are at a point where we want to check compliance, of course. So we published Information Request 3 of 2024, and we asked principal officers as well as administrators to give us updated information on trustees, because we needed to cross-reference that with our TTK platform to make sure that we're covering, you know, everyone. What we found from that is that 1,252 trustees were non-compliant. So that makes up about 20% of the ones that we have on the register. And we decided to issue them with Section 26(4) letters, and they now needed to get back to us within 30 days to tell us what are the reasons for your non-compliance, or to comply, because we're pushing for compliance. What we found that is most of them then decided to actually go and complete it, which is obviously what we are pushing for. And then also what we found was some of them decided to resign. Yeah, so we didn't even have to remove them. But it really is a way to make sure that, you know, members' monies are taken care of properly. Because if you are a trustee and you actually don't really want to be one, then don't be on the fund. You know, members' interest, it's important. That's why we're here when it comes to retirement funds. So that is what we've been looking at. We've been focusing on active funds, by the way. So when we sent out the information request, of course, we didn't really receive a lot of responses. So we thought we'd do it in 2 parts. We'll first focus on active funds, make sure all of them actually give us the information. So we are finalizing that now, and then we'll start looking at the terminating funds as well.
Okay.
Can I ask a question on that? With COFI coming in, is the trustee toolkit aligned with the qualifications and things you would expect of trustees at that time?
Yes, it is aligned, because that is the minimum requirement that we have right now. Things might change. We might look at formalizing it a bit, but for now, this is the minimum requirement.
Nice.
Very interesting.
While we are on COFI, Nicolette,
My favorite subject.
My favorite subject. So, I mean, you know, COFI has been coming on now for a while, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, my understanding is that it's currently sitting with the State Law Advisor for certification. But the question really is, how And I think, why is COFI changing things? I think maybe let's focus on specifically the Pension Funds Act.
Sure. So like the Board Notice 24 of 2002, the Pension Funds Act, you'll notice, is 1956. So we have a very old Pension Fund Act. Yes, we have had amendments to it, and the FSCA has issued regulations and conduct standards, but I think a necessary overhaul was necessary for the Pension Funds Act. And I think it's also important to know that the FSCA wants to regulate financial institutions on the same level. So, you know, it's pointless having a Pension Funds Act sitting here that's regulated by a Pension Funds Act that's got nothing to do with other financial sector laws. So I think that is one of the main reasons that COFI is coming in to change the pension fund industry. So the main thing, we're not going to have a Pension Funds Act anymore, we're going to have a Retirement Funds Act. And basically the Pension Fund Act is going to remain the same with certain amendments, which I'll get into shortly. And we're going to move from a registration system where a fund will just send in the documents that the Pension Funds Act requires and says, I want to register a pension fund, to a licensing of a pension fund. And that licensing is going to be aligned with the rest of the financial institutions. So like a administrator, for instance, or any other financial institution that needs to register with the FSCA, they're going to be under the same criteria. So we're moving from registration to licensing in effect. And then each category or activity that that financial institution performs is going to require its own license. So a retirement fund is considered a financial institution in terms of COFI, and their activity is going to be providing retirement fund benefits. So they would register that would be their license category. Similar to the phase, you know, you've got the different categories in phase. It's going to be very similar to that. Each category or activity that you perform has to have your own license. And then again, moving towards treating your customers fairly and aligning what we have now with how the rest of the financial institutions are licensed and regulated by the FSCA. So in effect, we're moving towards more of a conduct regulatory authority than more of a tick box exercise that we currently have. And the FSCA is going to be monitoring the conduct side of it, so making sure that the customers are treated fairly and the funds are doing what they're required to do, whereas the Prudential Authority is going to manage the financial aspects of that. Is the fund financially sound, for instance? Getting back to the Pension Funds Act, one of the big changes that is coming, there is an overhaul of Section 37C, not major, but the whole section has actually been repealed with a new section that is going to come in, and really it's just tying up loose ends that we have seen, because you'll know there's a lot of court cases and pension fund adjudicator complaints in relation to Section 37C and how do you determine when somebody is dependent and things like that. So there is an overhaul of Section 37C that we'll see. And there's a new unclaimed benefit fund that is going to be implemented, because again, we've had various issues with unclaimed benefits, all the billions that are sitting in that, and we're now going to be properly regulated in that. So I think it is a necessary that we've been hoping for probably the last 10, 15 years. We've been hoping for it to come in, and eventually we're going to see those changes. And I think it's going to regulate the pension fund side much better than it is right now, giving funds their discretion to manage their funds with the FSCA overseeing that and making sure that they are complying with the conduct standards that they expect them to comply with. So they can basically do what they want as long as they comply with those conduct standards, which I think is good. You know, it's not regulated, you have to do this, you have to do that. It's more use your discretion, but make sure you comply with our standards.
Yes. It actually reminds me of, this is completely off tangent, but it just reminds me of, you know, FICA, when we moved to a risk-based approach.
Yes.
So same like this. You know, you have discretion, but this is what you need to comply with.
So these are our standards, and you need to comply with them. However you do it, make sure that you comply with our standards. And I think it's good. I really do think it's a good overhaul.
No, I agree. So we've been speaking about administrators and trustees, but we obviously know that those aren't the only role players within this space. We also have, for example, employers who are participating in umbrella funds, right? So, Sanchia, is there anything that these employers that are participating in umbrella funds, is there anything that they need to be cognizant of? Will COFI affect them in any way?
There is a big change coming for employers in terms of the COFI Act. As you know, arrear contributions is a contentious issue, another contentious issue in our industry. You know, we published stats late 2023 that indicated that about 5.2 billion rand in arrear contributions, you know, was there in terms of 7,770 employers, mostly in the private security sector. So the issue with this is we currently do not regulate employers. And as we've gone along, we've also seen that certain employers just refuse to pay these arrear contributions, you know. After 3 years, they raise prescription. They just do not want to pay this. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's theft. You cannot take money from a member and tell them that you're going to pay it over to retirement fund and then make up excuses of how you needed it for something else. You can't do that. So, you know, we've been relying on trustees to report this to us, but they really haven't been doing what they were supposed to do. So COFI is going to be a game changer because under COFI, we will be regulating employers. They will be seen as a licensed entity with us, and we will have direct communication with them regarding these arrear contributions, because we really don't want to see this going forward anymore. It's a long-standing issue that we've had, and we really would like to see a bit of a change in this space.
So would trustees still be expected to report on?
Yes, they have a duty to
employers?
report. Yes, they have a duty to report, but we will no longer be relying on that, because sometimes they don't, sometimes they take too long, and like I said, these employers, they're getting creative. So
Yes.
yeah, no,
No, they really are.
that direct oversight is really needed at this point.
I think that also goes back to the conduct standard. You know, with Board Notice 24, there's no obligation really on the administrator, or there's no threat of a sanction or anything on an administrator to report it to the FSCA. You know, and I think because the administrators mainly get their own directors and things to sit on a sponsored fund, they just, don't tell them right now, let's see what we can do to work it out. Whereas now with the conduct standard and moving towards COFI, there's definitely going to be an obligation on the administrator, and if not the administrator, the employer and the FSCA stepping in to actually make sure that these funds are paid over. So I think all in all, you can see how the framework's coming together, and everybody's working together to get to that point.
Yes, the piece of the puzzle is coming together. Yes. Will the FSCA still be naming and shaming?
That is what we're currently doing because we have no other option.
Okay.
So with the naming and shaming, weirdly enough, we only looked at, we looked mostly at the period that the contributions were in arrears, you know, especially with the prescription issue. And so we did not publish all of their names. We published about just over 2,000. But you know what? So many employers who were not even on the list called us and said, please don't put me on the list. I promise I will pay my arrear contribution. So we're seeing a lot of compliance in this. But I don't think there will be a need for the naming and shaming once we have that direct oversight. Yes.
Can I just ask you a question on that naming and shaming? I know some of the employers came to you and said, don't name us, but did you actually get any of the arrear contributions back through that?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yes, they actually paid.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was effective.
Yes, it was quite effective because, I mean, it's a reputational risk for them.
Yes.
So of course they would prefer to comply.
But it's actually quite bizarre because the Act has things in place that the fund can go to the FSCA and say, listen, I'm having some financial difficulty, help me, can I go on a contribution holiday, can you implement something to assist me? But it's so crazy that they just don't pay the contributions over rather than do that.
Yeah, that actually happened during COVID, where some employers just said, look, I can't, can you please assist me? And we did that. You know, arrear contributions, it comes from before COVID. It's a long-standing issue. So it's those ones that we're struggling with mostly. But with COVID, we had employers who actually came to us and asked us if we could assist them.
Yeah. Amazing.
I've seen some very interesting cases actually come out from arrear contributions, where some employers really have the weirdest, strangest, what do you call
excuses
exactly for like not paying arrear contributions and not wanting to take accountability. I mean, even though the Pension Funds Act has that Section 13A person who will be responsible if contributions are not forthcoming, you then find some employer saying, well, but you know, I know that I'm the responsible person, but you know, I just started this position, and that's not an excuse.
It's similar to that Install Air case now recently in the Western Cape High Court, where the directors were actually held personally liable. And I think more cases like that need to actually come about, because I mean, some of the excuses were, oh well, I didn't participate in the financial management of the company. It doesn't matter. As a director, you are involved in working with that company, so you should know. I mean, they were aware that the contributions weren't paid. So I think, you know, with this new regulatory system that's coming in, I think employers should be scared and they should make sure that they pay those contributions.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, and the thing is, we don't really also look at funds to say there must be consequences, you know, in this when it comes to arrear contributions, because in other jurisdictions, the first time you do it, they say, okay, we'll give you another chance. The second time you do it, you are no longer allowed to take in new members. You know, they have those types of penalties. So maybe we also need to start looking at that.
Putting conditions on the way they operate.
Wow, okay, So as we're speaking about reforms that are to come, I'm not sure whether you can opine on this, Sanchia, but is South Africa anywhere near close to coming to moving towards a national social security fund?
Okay, so what I do want to say is adequate coverage is one of the big challenges that we have, not just in South Africa, but actually the entire continent, you know, and we are looking at various options right now. Nothing is set in stone, so I cannot say, yes, we are going the NSS effort. And also sometimes it's going to be a combination of things, because it's not just a certain group that needs, you know, we're looking at, I mean, 30% of the formal sector do not belong to retirement funds, and that's generally due to the voluntary nature of our system, you know. So in terms of that, something we mentioned auto-enrollment. Auto-enrollment could really assist in that regard. We are currently looking at the NEST system, which is the UK system, because they have auto-enrollment and they've been quite successful. So we'll be doing a bit of research on that. And then we look at, of course, the informal sector where millions of workers are not covered, and it's generally due to the fact that there's no like employer-employee relationship, and also the contributions are very irregular. So we're also looking at things like micro pensions, you know. We are quite fortunate to be a member of APSA, which is the Africa Pensions Supervisors Association. My HOD is actually the chairperson there. And, you know, we really collaborate in these spaces. And we didn't even know, you know, that there are African countries which are leaders in this. Kenya and Rwanda, they have a digital platform where, you know, for the informal sectors, where irregular contributions is taken care of. So there's that. And then, of course, there's NSSF. More of a mandatory system, you know, it has the tiered approach. We're also looking at that, but right now we cannot for sure say which direction we're heading in.
Okay. Well, it's nice to hear that you are considering. You are,
I think there's a big gap in that area, the gig economy, they call it, where, like you say, the informal sector hasn't got access to. I mean, they can go and get a retirement annuity, but they actually need to have something more protected, like an occupational fund. And
it doesn't adequately cover the informal sector, especially due to the irregular contributions. So you can't really look at the retirement annuities, you know, to cover that for us.
And is there anything with regards to member education in that space that needs to be done?
Of course, that will need to be done. But we'll do that once we make a decision.
Okay,
I think that comes back to what I was saying on financial education earlier. You know, like when we saw the two-part, where people just knew they had money and they just wanted to take it out, people need to be trained that you've got this money, but it's not for now. It's for one day when you retire, because otherwise you're going to become a burden on somebody else, even the government. So I think it all goes, it centers around financial education. And I know the FSCA's got that, I think they've got a stand or a thing that they're doing on financial education where they're giving winners prizes and things like that. And I think it's excellent that not only training people who contribute to retirement funds, but I think everybody needs to have financial education for their future.
That is actually quite true. No, that would be our consumer education department. Yeah, no, they're looking at that. We also assist in terms of, making sure the information is accurate, because, with the two-pot, so many people got it wrong, and it makes members unsettled when they hear the incorrect information, because then they come to us and they fight with us on that, Oh no, why is there a maximum? Oh no. And you tell them, no, that was just with the seed capital, but as your pot grows, there is no maximum, there's only a minimum, So those are the types of issues that we had. So we also did a lot of roadshows in terms of the two-pot, where we presented, especially with bargaining councils, just to educate members, to make sure that they have the right information, to tell them what comes from us is the correct information, and, and what they've been hearing is actually quite incorrect. And, in terms of financial literacy, even though it's a big issue, there are people who are financially literate, but, COVID really changed things a bit fast. It laid bare the societal issues that we have. And the middle class, honestly, it's just a lot of people in debt. And that's what COVID really exposed. And so many people lost their homes. That's not supposed to happen. You have a retirement fund that can assist in that case. And that is really what we wanted to make sure never happens again, But at the same time, it's a give and take. It's we gave you the savings pot, and the retirement pot, that is for when you retire, because members tend to, when they leave an employer, they tend to take all their money.
Yeah.
And they don't replace that, they don't increase it. So that give and take will also help us in the end, because 6% of people can retire comfortably, and we really want that to increase. And I think the two-pot will really assist in that, especially with the take that we.
And I think employers were also at fault there, because in a lot of instances, I know of employers who allowed their employee to resign, get their retirement benefits, and then re-employ them and started with day one contributions again. So I think, as much as the member is to blame for taking their money out, I think the employer should also understand that there is a goal here. We need these people to retire with sufficient income.
Yes, yes. I loved how you put it, the give and the take, right? So I think we can all agree that these retirement reforms that have been implemented and those that are in the pipeline, those that are being considered, that they broadly are aimed at preservation, accessibility, and perhaps sustainability.
Yeah.
But I want to know whether you guys think whether are these opposing themes, or do they work together, accessibility but like preservation at the same time?
I think they are opposing to a certain extent, but I think the two-pot system is a very good example of how they can work together. Accessibility, but not the full amount. A certain portion of your retirement savings can be accessible, with a larger portion being preserved. I think that does work. And sustainability, I think it's all about the long-term goal of keeping those funds invested. When we got to Reg 28, keeping them invested in the correct investments to ensure long-term sustainability for those investments, and to make sure that that person retires with as much money as
is possibly can.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in one way, yes, I think they are opposing, but I think they can all work together, as we've already seen they can.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think with the savings component, what also deterred members was the tax.
Yes.
Once you see a lot of people then decided, you know what, I no longer want to do this. So, and At the end of the day, it's really just supposed to be for the people who actually need to access it. People who the situation is so dire that the tax is not even being considered. I just need a bit of assistance right now.
And I don't think that's how it was on the first draw. I think people were just so excited that there was access to a certain portion of their benefit that they didn't have to leave their employment. And I think through further education with the members and those that have withdrawn and seen the tax implications, I think they're learning that, maybe I shouldn't withdraw it. Maybe I should just leave it for the biggest rainy day.
Yes.
And another thing that the two-pot did, I touched on arrear contributions, is that members now realize that they had arrear contributions. It was actually quite sad to see, but what it did was there was that push from members as well to say, you deducted this money, what happened? Such a regulatory push as well as from the members. And that also, I think, will assist with the current arrear contribution issue that we have.
That's very important, because also with COFI coming in and the new conduct standard, there's provisions for better communication with members. And like Sanchia just said, now members didn't even know they were in arrears. So this better communication policy and the new complaints policies that are coming in, I think is going to enhance the treating customers fairly again, so that members are fully apprised of what actually is happening in the fund.
No, you're right. And of course we will check it. We do a lot of on-site inspections. We ask them to give us samples so that we can see that you are actually getting this message across.
Excellent.
Nice, yes. So, we are on this journey. It continues. I think, just as in closing, is there anything else that, role players in this space, and role players being administrators, trustees, members, employers, advisors, is there anything that we need to keep in mind as we, head into the future?
I think from my perspective is, I think they must grab this new regulatory framework and work with the FSCA. I think it's going to do them the world of good to understand that they've got their own discretion to run their business or their fund the way they want to run it, and then make sure that they comply with the standards. I don't think it's a negative for them, and I don't think it should be taken as a negative for those role players. I think it's a good thing, and they need to just work towards it to ensure that the members have what they want to have at the end of their careers.
Yes.
So I think it's a very good thing,
Okay.
Yes, it shouldn't be seen as a negative, you're right, but we are going to tighten regulation, which obviously is something that we have to do, Otherwise, you sit with these contentious problems for a really long time. So there's that, and there's also what I would want to say with the toolkit is, yes, we revised it, but we will be updating it as we go. So over the next 2 years, we will be working on a COFI module, as well as a two-pot module. So members will have to also comply with that. Trustees will have to comply with that, yes.
I think it's good, keeping up to date with what's happening in the regulatory field. I think it's very important for trustees to understand that. It's not, they don't really need to understand the Pension Funds Act only. There's the regulatory issues, what can go wrong if I don't do this, and what can the FSCA do? I think it's very important.
Yes, very important. Ladies, thank you so much. This brings us to the end of this segment. Nicolette, Sanchia, I appreciate your invaluable insights. I, for one, have learned quite a few things this morning, so thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us. We trust that this segment was informative and that it gave you some food for thought. All of us in the retirement space need to be aware and compliant with everything that is coming out. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to hand back to Nompumelelo, who will let us know what is next. Thank you and goodbye.